heaps to talk about. We've got a limited amount of time to do it in, so we've got to squeeze everything in. But Dimmer, Jake, last night the news broke that Damien Hardwick would be stepping down. We've since learned this morning, this is Tuesday morning, that he won't even coach this week. This is effective immediately. No farewell game. He arrived at the press conference in casual dress. A bit emotional. But
very emotional. And as you would be.
Richmond's longest serving coach, 307 games. 170 wins, 6 draws, and 131 losses. So a win percentage of 56.35%, but obviously underlining his tenure as the 3 premierships in that time, including the one in the hub in 2020. It's a fair old resume to leave behind.
Well, it is, and just more broadly on Damien Hardwick, if you look at obviously the 3 premierships he won as Richmond coach, was also involved with a Hawthorn premiership in 2008 as an assistant coach. And
Port Essendon as a player as well,
and 2 as a player. So that's so 6 involved in 6 premierships. I mean, there's not many football people that sort of can claim that.
And it's a world sport sort of phenomenon. You talk about winners, people that just seem to go places and win. And Damien Hardwick was one of those players. Even as a player, as I said, 2 premierships and very valuable in both of those premierships, and even as assistant coach and coach.
So an amazing legacy he leaves behind, and I am convinced that this is not the last we will see of him. I believe he will come back and coach, and if it is burnout that he's experienced at the Tigers, completely understandable. We see it happen, and we've seen it happen quite a lot in the last sort of 5 to 10 years. I probably hope that he doesn't come straight back into coaching next year, because it's I think that's a little bit of a bad look if he once Richmond's sort of on.
Why do you say that out of interest?
Well, I just think Richmond just clearly on the decline. First time in 7 years trending in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm. He's been there through tough times already.
He has, but that was early in his tenure where he wouldn't leave on his account. He wouldn't say, because then he would never get another job again.
Yep.
But now that he's won 3 premierships, I think most clubs would be lining up to have him coach their team. So, I don't know. I just think if he is truly burnt out, that's a completely reasonable and fair enough reason to step down. But I just think if we see him coaching West Coast or Gold Coast or any team round 1 next year, I don't know. I just think you need to take that time to actually get your head right and then come back and go again.
Has had an interesting relationship with the media. Could see him doing a media role for 12 months, maybe a bit longer, kind of like Nathan Buckley did before he started his first coaching role.
And I thought Buckley was really good, and I think the same with Damien Hardwick. I really like listening to the way he speaks about the game. His analysis. I think he's a very genuine, honest person. The way he talks, and I don't think there's enough of that in football.
So just looking, taking a step back and thinking about the legacy that we talked about before. When he came to the club, Richmond
they were a rabble.
Well, you sort of think about defining moments for Richmond over that time period, and I can think of the fans spitting on the players, hanging over the race, the Frawley era, the Terry Wallace era, just things that didn't go well. Jordan McMahon, the goal that got the dusty pick, and that kind of started to move things. But even when Hardwick was in charge, things weren't perfect from the get-go, and there was a real risk of him being sacked after 2016.
It looked like a certainty that it was going to happen.
Lost by 100, I think it was 16 points to Sydney in the last game. That was the famous, was it Mario from Doncaster talkback call, where he talked about how he'd vomited on himself, and if you haven't heard that, please go to YouTube, just Mario from Doncaster. It's very good.
And then check out the Carlton one from this week.
That was also very good. But he turned things around.
He did.
I think, it's obviously not just on him. He had a great sort of panel with him. Peggy O'Neill was there. Brendan Gale's been there. And he's had great support. But for him to galvanise the squad that he had, the leadership in players like Trent Cotchin, in Revolt, and to forge the Richmond men mentality as well. And we saw a lot of this during the Hub and the Amazon documentary. Just his ability to be a leader of men sort of really shone through, and he changed that club.
And you talk about the team that he had behind him, sort of off field, Peggy and Brendan Gale and that. I'm sure they all sat in the room together and did it as a club, but they did put the pressure on. I think it was 9 or 10 years ago where we said they're going to win what was it?
Three flags
in the next
10 years,
or 10 years or something, and they put it out there, and he was the man that had to sort of guide the team and was the one that helped them succeed to do that.
And I think a big part of not so much his legacy, but something that he probably does leave for coaches at all clubs now is you need to give coaches time. You can't be super hasty in getting rid of coaches. As we've spoken at Carlton, constantly and even Michael Voss, he's only been there a season and a half, and people already want to get rid of him. You've got to give coaches time, and Damien Hardwick was this close to being gone. We saw it with Nathan Buckley as well, and you just give coaches a bit more time to work with the playing group.
Bomber Thompson and Hardwick, I think, had very, very,
Yep.
very, on parity in sort of how their early parts of their careers went.
So, kind of speaking about Bomber Thompson, since 2000, where does he sort of rank in terms of coaching?
Well, I think most people would probably, since 2000, I think most people would probably have Alistair Clarkson on top. Is Damien Hardwick number 2?
I don't know.
Chris
I'm
Scott?
taking the sort of tactical part about it. If you're looking at supporter bases and their most revered coach since 2000, I think it's Damien Hardwick. To bring 3 flags to that fan base, and I was listening to a little bit of talk back on the way here today, it is just absolute love for him from Richmond supporters of, you've brought the happiest moments to our family for 30 years and et cetera, et cetera. So I think in terms of a fan base and the love of their coach, don't know, we're sort of Victorian based. I don't know. I think Longmire is very much revered in Sydney, but I don't see another one like Damien Hardwick who is just loved so much by his fan base.
So very different circumstances, but that's 2 coaches now that have stepped down through burnout, whatever you want to call it, sort of mental, physical toll. You go back a few years, Brad Scott, when he stepped down from North, kind of similar thing.
Yep.
How tough is it? It must be extremely, like the pressure on being a coach of an AFL football club, and when things aren't going well, it must really be quite extreme. It's constant.
Yeah, a massive amount of pressure. Obviously, we don't know what that's like. We're not in that position, but you would imagine it is extreme pressure, as it should be. I mean, you've got, you're reading stories that people are now spitting on Michael Voss walking down to the bench, not wanting to come back down to the bench.
Is that right?
Yeah. And it's sad. And when you're someone like Damien Hardwick who's been through the rough times, have the success, and then it starts to tail off again, and you kind of know what might be in store around the corner. It's hard because you've felt that pressure before. You know what it's like every day having to go in, every loss having to explain what went wrong. And people think, oh, well, people would kill to have that job. It's a great job. You get paid. You blah 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 blah. But it's not all roses, and that's the thing that we're finding out.
So the old adage, especially in footy, is the coaching the dominoes, right? So that means that 1 brings 2 brings 3. So what does this mean, I think, for the broader AFL community? You look over towards the West, Adam Simpson, he's committed to the rebuild publicly of West Coast, but there's a lot of pressure coming from the media, a lot of pressure coming from the fans, a lot of pressure coming from the results. 6 scoring shots on the weekend. They got pummeled by the bottom team by more than 100 points. What does this mean for the coaching merry-go-round? Can you see this being one of many dominoes now?
Well, like I said, I'm all for Damien Hardwick taking time away from football. I would be disappointed if he was coaching this time next year. If he's coaching round 1 next year, because coaching round 1 next year means that he's going to be at the club several months before that. And I just think it's a bit of a bad look. If you do want to step away from football and you are experiencing burnout, because we don't see any of this for coaches that are having success. We don't see that in the winning years when there's potential to go all the way. So I don't think there should be, but of course there will be, and there will be speculation. I think he will coach again. I just don't think it should be next year.